in celebration of all things Halloween, if it's Halloween today, because the 31st, if you're not watching it on Halloween, soz. This is all about the Lammas Hireling, which is a poem of the decade poem, which I think will very much come up in the 2024 exam for Edexcel. I'm just going to run through some really key points and hopefully reduce the PTSD. So some terms to always use whenever you get this poem is number 1, purposefully ambiguous or purposeful ambiguity. Macabre, M-A-C-A-B-R-E, meaning the kind of dark side of life, and an unsettling poem. And whilst it is a really strange poem and lots of students freak the hell out, try not to. Really embrace the kind of archaic folklore, old worldy feel of this poem, because Ian Duhigg is a contemporary poet and he's doing that purposefully, again there's that word, to create a very new kind of world. It's a kind of harping back to Thomas Hardy era of the 1800s, where England was all kind of pastoral and green. Yes, it's hard to get your head around as a kind of maybe inner city London kid, but just try and get your head set in the kind of world of the archaic and the rustic and the pastoral. Anyway, ostensibly, which basically means on the surface, this is a poem about a farmer who goes to buy a farmhand and initially is a great farmhand where, quote, heifers doubled, so win-win. But over the course of the second stanza, things change and this farmhand becomes really weird and is found naked in a fox trap, and it all becomes really crazy and pagan and dodge. And basically this farmhand, through the eyes of the farmer, becomes a hare, and hares are very supernatural, mystical beings. The farmer then shoots this weird being and then spends the rest of the poem or the rest of his life creating bullets, casting bullets, and in a confessional, asking for forgiveness. But this is all through the eyes of an incredibly unreliable narrator. The farmer is not to be trusted. This is all through his dramatic monologue, and it is all full of his guilt and his potential sexual obsession with this farmhand. And it's almost like he's using this monologue to justify his murder, when actually he is the one to blame. He is totally guilty. Don't trust him implicitly. So much so that the farmer is in perpetual confession to get forgiveness for his sin. There's this notion of Catholic guilt here, and potentially that linking to that sexuality and him being drawn to the male farmhand. However, he's never going to be forgiven because he can never articulate the sin, aka there's no clarity as to what he's actually done. That clears that up. Some key features are the archaic language, like muckle sorrow, muckle care, Lammas, which is actually a day in August of celebration, a kind of harvest festival kind of style, that kind of world of rural England that Ian Duhigg is trying to harp back to for contemporary readers. Obviously, the world of pagan rituals, really heavy in this poem. You've got this phrase, elf shot, the fox trap, you've got the warlock, you've got loads and loads of kind of pagan rituals which seep through this macabre poem. You've got lots of contrast between light and dark, again, really underlining this kind of odd, mystical, transgressive world. You've got the really short, sharp sentences of the farmer. My favourite is, I grew fond of company, un gentleman that knew when to shut up, which again kind of really underlines just how authoritative and in control this farmer really is. He's not an innocent victim who's just watching this. He's a bit of a dodgy character himself. And then another thing I like students to mention is the structural symmetry of this poem. There are 4 stanzas, all of very similar line lengths and very similar numbers of lines per stanza, which I think kind of again shows just how in control our farmer really is and how authoritative and meditative he is in his act of transgression. Yeah, so I definitely think this poem might come up for 2024. It certainly hasn't come up yet. Try to enjoy the ambiguity. Try to not stamp this poem into the ground with, this is about this, because we don't know, but it's a celebration of all things weird. So hashtag Halloween, even if you're not watching this on Halloween. And hopefully that's helpful. And yeah, just try and embrace the weirdness.